Right now, I'm in Casa Grande, Arizona. Now, I love road trips and unique and interesting roadside stops. Throughout New Mexico and Arizona, there are a number of quirky travel centers owned by a company called Bowlin's, with names like Running Indian and The Thing. Well, join us, as over the next couple days, we're going to visit every single Bowlin's travel center. Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Sometimes I have an idea for a video, and everyone I mention it to says, that sounds pretty crazy. Well, this is one of those videos. Being a fan of the road trip, I love checking out different roadside stops, and every time we stopped at one, it seemed like Bowlin's is keeping the spirit alive of the places that you'd beg your parents to stop at when you were on a road trip as a kid. A lot of these places look wild, and like all good road trip stops, they have snacks and all that, but also things like Indian jewelry and fireworks and those weird and unique kinds of gifts you'd never find at any normal store, only a place on the side of the highway. This video is of course not sponsored or endorsed by Bowlin's in any way, but when I realized I could line up all their travel centers in a way to do a trip visiting them all, well, against my better judgment, here we are. So let's get to the first Bowlin's. We've made it to our first Bowlin's, Picacho Peak Plaza. And interestingly enough, there's actually two Bowlin's on this exit from Interstate 10. So getting the first two knocked out is going to be pretty easy. But let's take a look inside our first stop, Picacho Peak Plaza. I had mentioned that most of the Bowlin's stops have unique looks. The Picacho Peak Plaza looks like an old Spanish mission on the outside. This stop is of course named for Picacho Peak, which is visible right behind it. Unlike your normal truck stops on the side of the freeway, there is usually quite a bit of stuff at a Bowlin's travel center. A lot of the stops are called things like trading posts or outposts for that reason, and also to call back to earlier times. Along with the normal things you'll find at most stops, a Bowlin's usually features a lot of Native American goods. This goes back to the company's beginning, as its founder Claude M. Bowlin, while working with the A.B. McGaffey Company in 1912, began trading with Native Americans in New Mexico. At the same time, he began learning their languages and customs, but we'll get more into the history later in this trip. Of course, other items you'll find at every stop include things like t-shirts and various random souvenirs, to fireworks, to things like buffalo heads. Something that I think I've only ever seen at places like this are jackalopes. Those are the fictional rabbits with antlers. I'm pretty sure I saw a few last time I was here, but aside from these snow globes, I haven't seen any on this visit. I guess they must hibernate or something. Like any good road trip stop, there is a bunch of different snacks here. It just looks like we'll need to watch out for some wild animals while we buy them. I'm sure we'll get to see tons of random stuff on this trip, but it's time to head to our next stop. Luckily, we don't have to go far. It's right across the street. Well, I did say most of the stops look cool. This one definitely looks boring compared to its neighbor. We've stopped across the street quite a few times over the years, but I don't think I've ever been in here before. This place is a bit smaller than the Picacho Peak Plaza, but the main difference is there is a Dairy Queen here, so I guess if you need a Blizzard or something, come to this one. But for me, I like the look of the one across the street better. I have a feeling we're going to see plenty of these type of souvenirs over the next couple of days, so let's go ahead and get back on the road and head to our next stop, which also happens to be one of the most well-known roadside attractions of all time. Signs along the freeway for The Thing can be found for miles in all directions. In fact, that's one of the hallmarks of most of the Bowlin's travel centers, a lot of signs. You never don't know when one of these stops is coming up. We've made it to our third stop, which is one of the most iconic roadside attractions in the United States, The Thing. The Thing has been around since the 1950s and was originally located in California between Barstow and Baker. It moved to its present location in 1965, and Bowlin's bought it in the late 1960s after the death of the original owner. The whole place was built around the mystery of what The Thing is, but a few years ago they also added an aliens versus dinosaurs theme. The Thing has a pretty large gift area with lots of cool branded merchandise. We even found The Thing water. But of course the real attraction here is The Thing and aliens fighting dinosaurs. So let's head into the museum and check that out. I was getting a little worried because I know I mentioned jackalopes earlier and then we haven't seen one in a while. Well, now we've hit the jackalope jackpot. And we've also hit the dinosaur and alien jackpot too. This place has a whole elaborate backstory built around the aliens and the dinosaurs. Here's Winston Churchill being driven around by an alien. So the Thing is in this cave right behind me. So I'm not going to show what the Thing is in this video. We did a whole video on the Thing before. So if you want to see it, go ahead and check that video out. But that's our look at the Thing, which is also the last Bowlin's Travel Center in Arizona. So now it's on to New Mexico. We've made it to our first stop in New Mexico, the historic Continental Divide Trading Post. Claude Bowlin opened his original Continental Divide Trading Post in 1946, making this his second location. But that location closed in 1957 because Interstate 10 was going right through where the store was located. They actually moved the building, and then the trading post ended up moving again to its current location. So now it's about 20 miles away from its original spot. It actually seems a lot bigger on the inside here than it looks on the outside. We're trying to buy something at every stop, so I think here I'll pick up one of these Continental Divide t-shirts. So you might be wondering what makes this a historic trading post. I don't actually know, but that's what the sign says, and far be it for a roadside stop to embellish or mislead anyone. But this is the Continental Divide, and so at the Continental Divide, water on the west side of it flows towards the Pacific, water on the east side flows towards the Atlantic. Now I'm not really sure if we're on the Continental Divide or if the Continental Divide is to the west or to the east of us, but I thought of a really scientific and accurate way to find out. We're gonna use some water. So if this water goes to the east, we know we're going towards the Atlantic. And if it goes to the west, we know it's going to the Pacific. Well, it went towards my wife, so I'm not exactly sure what that means. But anyways, let's hit back on the road and get to the next Bowlin's. We're at our fifth stop, Bowlin's Butterfield Station, so we're about at the halfway point. I don't think I've ever seen so many animal sculptures and Indian jewelry in one day in my life. This place is named for the old Butterfield stagecoach that operated from 1858 to 1861. The stagecoach route went right through this area. I think this building looks pretty cool, like an oversized old stagecoach station. Like every other stop, there is a big variety of stuff for sale here. I'm pretty sure a lot of the stuff you could buy at these places, you'd have a hard time finding somewhere that isn't on the side of the freeway. Since we've made it to the halfway point and a lot of these Bowlins have Dairy Queens, I broke down and decided to get a Blizzard. I am starting to get a little disappointed at the lack of jackalopes that we've seen, though I guess they're probably endangered. But anyways, on to the next one. Now we're at Bowlin's Akela Flats trading post, which is currently the oldest operating Bowlin's, having operated since 1946, when this was historic Highway 80. This Bowlin's has a Old West ghost town theme to it. This trading post hasn't always looked this way. When it opened in 1946, it looked a lot like any other trading post you would have found at the time, but by the 1960s, the Old West ghost town theme was in place, though it used to look a little more realistic. This was Claude Bowlin's third store, and with the Continental Divide trading post having closed and moved a couple of times, as I mentioned, it is the oldest one that is still in operation. One of the reasons I wanted to visit all these places is because of the history. I mean, one of the funnest things about any road trip is the stops you make along the way, and these places are a real throwback. People have been stopping here for generations. I could just imagine my grandparents making a stop here when they were young. Plus, there is so much personality at a place like this compared to a modern stop like a Love's or a Pilot. I mean, are you going to find a buffalo head for sale at a Circle K? Alright, so we got one more of these today, then it's off to our hotel, which hopefully is a little bit nicer than the Olapri Hotel here. We're at Bowlin's Old West, our 7th Bowlin's today, and this one looks pretty cool, so let's take a look around and then head on inside. I really love the look of this place. When I think of a Southwest trading post, a place like this comes to mind. I especially love the paintings on this building. I have to say, this is probably my favorite exterior of all the stops we've visited so far. 60 plus years ago, paintings like these would have been common on these types of trading posts, and in fact, the very first Bowlin's would have had similar paintings. Inside the store, the Old West trading post has pretty much the same stuff as the previous 6 stops that we've made, so there isn't much difference. Though, I'm probably going to see moccasins and small animal statues in my dreams tonight. So we're about to leave the Old West trading post, and that sign behind me is a little bit of a preview of tomorrow, as our first stop tomorrow should be Bowlin's Running Indian. The first 7 Bowlin's were pretty easy. They were all on Interstate 10. The last 3, unfortunately, are a lot more spread out. We got to start heading north, where the weather is going to get a little bit colder for us. But let's head to the hotel and get ready for tomorrow and some more Bowlin's. After a somewhat peaceful night's sleep in Las Cruces, which is about an hour or so south of here, we've made it to Bowlin's Runnin' Indian. Now the weather has definitely taken a little bit of a turn. It is really overcast. It is a lot colder than it was yesterday. I'm wearing my jacket now. And when I first came up with the idea for this video, I was telling my wife about it, and I said, I don't think anyone's ever done this before. And she said, why would they? You know, I bet people said the same thing to Magellan and Lewis and Clark. But anyways, let's check out Bowlin's Runnin' Indian. Much like the countless advertisements for these places along the road, the outside of Running Indian looks like a giant billboard. Inside, of course, there is more of the same type of stuff we saw all day yesterday. Fireworks and Native American goods, and even this dragon salt and pepper shaker that we bought for my brother-in-law. I don't think I've mentioned hot sauce yet. Over the last few years, seemingly every roadside stop sells hot sauce. As cold as it is today, I'm thinking about drinking some straight. Now it's time to head off to the next Bowlin's, which unfortunately is 166 miles from here, so we have a long drive ahead of us. Right down the street from Bowlin's Running Indian is the world's largest pistachio, so we had to make a quick stop here to check this out. But anyways, let's get back on the road. Wow, there is a herd of tumbleweeds crossing the road right now. I don't think I've ever seen so many tumbleweeds before in my life, and I don't think I've ever hit so many tumbleweeds with a car before in my life either. So we survived a dust storm and a tumbleweed stampede, and the clouds have somewhat went away, but the cold and the wind sure hasn't. But we are at Bowlin's Flying Sea Ranch, and it is so cold out here, I am heading inside. I'm not really sure what I think this place looks like. I think it looks kind of like a cross between a fort and a dairy. Or maybe it even looks like a school. Since all of these places are run by the same company, most of the merchandise at each one of them is the same. I think only the Thing and Continental Divide had any branded merchandise that we saw. Well, here's something we haven't seen before. We've seen a few heads, but this is the first full buffalo we've seen. And all for the low price of $20,000. If anyone is in the market for one, here you go. Oh wow, there's a bear in here too. You know, if this bear chases you, you have to leave the store. They won't let you in here with the bear behind. Alright, time to jump in the car, get the heater going, and it's 162 miles to our next stop. So after 721 miles of driving from our first stop, we've made it to our 10th Bowlin's Bluewater Outpost. Now this isn't our last stop, we still have one more stop, so stay tuned for that. But let's check out Bowlin's Bluewater Outpost, which to be honest, does not look as interesting as a lot of the other Bowlin's we've been to. As we've gone west, it has gotten colder and there is now snow on the ground. This is definitely one of the more boring looking buildings we've visited. I'd say it's tied with the second place we stopped for least exciting design. But let's head inside where hopefully it's warm. If I was able to make one suggestion to the Bowlin's company, it would be that they should add some sort of passport where you can get a stamp at each of their stores, kind of like the Route 66 or Lincoln Highway passports that you could pick up. I think it would make a fun souvenir that would encourage people to visit these unique stops. I don't think I've ever been so tempted to buy some fireworks. Whoever comes up with these names, job well done. So that was Bowlin's Bluewater Outpost. Now we have one more stop and it's right near here, but to get there we have to head back to historic Route 66. Now we're on historic Route 66, and our final stop on this who knows why the heck we're doing it Bowlin's road trip is where it all began. The former site of Bowlin's old Crater Trading Post. The very first trading post Claude Bowlin opened in 1935. Claude M. Bowlin moved to New Mexico in 1906 from Oklahoma, and in 1912 he began trading with the local Native Americans. He married Willa Bowlin in 1919, and over the next few years, they were involved with several trading posts in the Gallup and Farmington areas of New Mexico. In 1935, Bowlin sold his interest in another trading company and opened the Old Crater Trading Post right here on Route 66. This portion of Route 66 was still unpaved at the time. The trading post here became the center of community life for the surrounding Navajo population. Claude Bowlin, who spoke Navajo, was very well regarded in the Native American community. When this part of Route 66 was finally paved in 1938, business picked up here substantially. Then, with the end of World War II in 1945, the age of the road trip really began and business was booming. Bowlin was able to open 3 additional trading posts in 1946. Now, this isn't the original building from 1935. The Bowlins demolished the first Old Crater Trading Post and constructed this new building in 1954. Despite this place being closed for years, you can still see a lot of the artwork that was on the building. It's a lot like the Old West Trading Post we visited earlier. Once Interstate 40 was built and Route 66 was largely abandoned, that spelled the end for this place. It ended up closing in 1973, and Claude Bowlin died in 1974. After Claude's death, his wife sold the property with a stipulation that it be used for religious purposes only. The building was home to the Bluewater Bible School and Church for a few years, but it has been abandoned since the 1990s. Willa Bowlin died in 1996. The Old Crater Trading Post was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2006. Interstate 40 is at a dead stop right now because of an accident. You can see all these trucks lined up. It is traffic for miles. But then you look over here at Route 66 and there's no traffic whatsoever, and both roads are heading the same direction. Nothing beats a road trip. Even something as silly as visiting a bunch of quirky trading posts alongside the interstate can become an awesome expedition. Thank you so much for joining us as we visited every single Bowlin's Travel Center. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.